Hey coaches, are you running a 2-3 zone and just getting trampled on sometimes? Is the other team scoring against you in a 2-3 zone? If so, I want you to watch this video. I'm going to talk about 5 different things and mistakes that you might be making that you can fix to make your 2-3 zone just a little bit better. Number one is just overextending your top guards. That can be one of the biggest mistakes when running the 2-3 zone, is just the defenders pressuring up a little bit too high, and I'll kind of show you what I mean by that. And quite honestly, you do want your defenders to do this, but you know what offenses will do a lot of times, especially when they're running when they have a nice lead, is they'll space out their offense just to space out your defense, right? Like, you know, they know that, you know, if they've got a 10-point lead and you're running a 2-3 zone, you probably should think about adjusting it. But if you're a new coach and that's what your team knows, you may have to do it, especially if they're overrunning you on a man. So they'll play out here, and your players are gonna have to come out, right? Like, they're gonna have to come out, and they do this on purpose because you'll have this player come out and they'll just pass the ball over here, and then this player will pop out. I mean, you guys have all seen this, right? Like, if this is happening to you, my suggestion is, number one, if you can switch to a man, do it. But if you have to switch to if you have to do a 2-3, I would probably start pressure them, just depending on what your game plan is and what your team is capable of. But what I would start doing is, and I don't want to adjust. I don't want your thinking to be wrong on this, because running a tight 2-3 is a great way to keep teams from coming in and scoring. But if they're already up, what I like to do is I'll put in my player that I know can, like, I'll put in like a bigger athletic player, and I'll have them come down the court with them. So these two guards will basically come down the court. Now listen, this is important. You don't want them to just be able to break across and now they're attacking your 3 players down here. So you want to have these 2 guys kind of work together, and basically what they're just trying to do is they're trying to herd cattle, okay? They're just trying to walk them into a trap. And I'll make other videos on how this works, but you want to get that ball to one side, and you essentially, when you're teaching your 2-3 zone anyways, you always want that ball on one side, and you just want to funnel them into the trap. That's it. And then you want to keep the ball over there. So kind of how it looks is, let's say that they still have it extended. You can put your player here and have the one right here guarding the high post. It'll make it a little bit harder for them to go, especially if this guard right here is mobile and like he's moving back and forth and he's really discouraging the pass to this player. So that's really how that should look. But if you overextend if they're spacing out their 2-3 zone, and you overextend yours, like I was showing you, you come up here to get the ball, these 2 guards come out, this is wide open. And if you bring this guy up, you're just going to start running into some problems with your defense being too spaced out. So that's just something to think about. That's when teams are up by a lot. They'll do that to you just so that they'll mess up your defense. The best thing to do is switch to a man, or just do what I just told you. Another thing you can do, I think I made a video on this in the past, but I love running this drill, or this defense. And this wasn't really meant to be a video. I wasn't thinking about bringing this up, but here's another option too, is like, if they want to play that game with you a couple times, you could get them to switch their offense up a little bit. So what I do, and this is very risky too, by the way, but I'll let them come up to, I'll let them dribble up to right about here, and then these 2 ferociously attack and trap, and basically try and set that point guard up for failure. He'll pick the ball up and he'll immediately try to pass the ball to his 2 wings. Right before these 2 execute, these guys are already moving up. Like, we don't want to telegraph it, but we want to try and intercept the ball. And usually we want these guys to be more like right here, and they could be right, like they could already be right there. And then if you pick that pass off, that'll mess them up a little bit. That's just adjusting or adapting to what the offense has. So that's another option there. Okay, moving into the next one, and just think aggressive on that. But moving into the next one, weak rotations on a skip pass, right? Like over over committing on like a skip pass or any type of pass, right? If you've got an offensive player here, your 2-3 zones, you're out. If there's if they rotate the ball really quick, and maybe your defense is still like maybe the defense still thinks the ball's here, but they do a skip pass, or they just rotate it really quick. This player running out will overcommit sometimes. I've seen it happen where they either foul them and they go for a 3, or they'll just overshoot and end up behind them, and then now the game's on. They're either shooting a 3 or they're driving in and scoring on you. So one way to fix that is just to do a lot of closeout drills. You can do this anywhere, right? You can set up lines and just have them sprint full force, and then to do the short choppy steps, their hands up. Teach hands up in the shooting lane, or for the shot, and also in the passing lane. That's super important. Do that repetitiously, every practice for weeks, and they should start figuring out to stop doing that. And this is actually could be your younger kids and your older kids that mess that up. But that overcommitting can be really bad, and it can happen a lot on a 2-3 zone when they do the skip passes or the quick rotations. They've got to rotate. They've got to move with that ball, so they're not in those positions where they have to do that. Okay, another one is forgetting to box out. I mean, this I think is for any defense. But what I teach my players is I'll have them get into a 2-3 zone, and I'll have the offense set up wherever they are, and I'll shoot the ball, and I'll for practice after practice, anytime that ball goes up, everybody's yelling shot, 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 and they're immediately finding a player to box out, boxing that player out, and you'll be amazed at how many rebounds you're going to get when that happens. I think that getting kids to box out is one of the hardest things to do, at least for me. Put a comment down below if you agree or disagree with me, but boxing out is so difficult for these kids sometimes. Not communicating on cutters is the fourth mistake that we make a lot of times as coaches or teams on 2-3 zone, is not communicating on cutters. I talk a lot about running that baseline offensive player, that baseline runner back and forth. But, and that's a perfect example of a cutter, but there could be cutters coming through your zone. Make sure that you're communicating. Your teams that's too long. I'll just say it. They need to talk. Hey, cutter behind me, cutter behind me. If anything, it confuses the offense sometimes to think, man, I'm not going to pass the ball. They're talking a lot. They know that the cutter's there. So definitely communicate if you can fix that. And it sounds great too. It's intimidating for teams, offensive teams, that when your team is just communicating, it destroys complacency for the defense. They start working together as a team. Communication's super important. I encourage you to encourage and enforce communications during practices when you're running scrimmages. I would stop a scrimmage because they're not talking and make them run. That's how important it is. And then the last mistake I'm going to talk about, which is really important as well, is leaving that high post open. We don't want the high post open, and in 2-3, that's one of our vulnerabilities, right? And I see what ends up happening a lot is teams will end up having this player float forward, and it ends up being a 2-1-2 zone. But that is one thing that does happen. What I like to do, and I think a lot of coaches probably do a lot of different things on this, and I'd love to hear what you do in the comments down below. But what I'll do is if the ball's passed to this guy, I'll have this person come out and I'll have this person rotate over, and they'll take. And that's a standard way that I do it with my teams, is that's how we're doing it. And then if the ball gets up here, if the kid's going to shoot from there, fine, go for it. But whenever we're back in the ball's in the middle, I'll just, I'm covering this guy down with 2 players. And you probably want to do that anyways. There's a lot of good high post players they'll put there, and you have 2 players kind of covering down. But they've got to be able to get over to this player quick. So just keep that in mind. I don't leave the high post open. I have somebody ready to execute, ready to defend that high post player And I also do the same thing for the wings, right? Like I don't want to leave the wings open either. So whenever the ball moves, this player comes out. Now he's guarding that person. If that post player is just huge, he's tall, and he's getting it in the middle every single time because it's impossible to guard him. I'll either put some different players in that might be able to help out with that, or what I'll do is I'll throw some really aggressive but disciplined defensive players in, and I will make it hard for them to get the ball to that player. They'll be on that person because usually they have a strategy when that happens. And if it's hard for that player to keep the ball up in the air, if it comes down low, like they're putting their hands on it, I'll come up with different strategies to defeat that, or I'll change my defense around a little bit. So with that being said, those are the 5 mistakes that I see happen a lot, or that I've experienced in my own coaching time, that I think that if you fix will be good. Throw in any comments that you have down below. If you like the video, you like this type of content, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and more will come.